Run, party, repeat. Welcome to the East Coast Adventures Dirt and Vert Podcast, where we talk all things running, racing, and training to help you get ready for your next big adventure.
Learn from our successes and our failures, and have fun at the same time. Join us right here every week with inspiring guests who share their captivating tales from the trails. And remember, nobody cares.
Run faster. All right, welcome back to the Dirt and Vert Podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Matt.
And we have a very special guest with us today. If you haven't recognized already, it's Jared Beasley, the author of the brand new book that we're getting ready to talk about, learning about Laz and his creative mind. And I got the pleasure of meeting Jared at the Trail Running Film Festival, got to interview him there with the Ultra Sign Up event that they had. I had really good conversation with him and Harvey, and it was pretty inspiring to listen how this book came to be. And we just wanted to share the story with all of our listeners. Mm-hmm. So Jared agreed to come on and talk, and we're super excited to have Jared here talk about the book. But before we get into the book, we have to ask Jared the same question we ask every listener, and that's tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into running.
Am a North Alabamian that has been living in New York for probably 25 years now. And I was a theater person and a literature person. And let me tell you that moving from North Alabama when your entire family has lived in North Alabama for literally hundreds of years, it's quite the shakeup. So I got into running because I was really going down a crazy tube of bad stuff that, you name it, I guess I was doing it or trying it at least. None of it was working. And this wild man moved next door to me. I was living in an 80 square foot room in Manhattan on 79th Street. And this Amazonian looking dude, he was tiny. He was like 5'8", but he was built like you wouldn't believe. Like, he was wired. He wasn't like huge, like stocky guy. But he was mostly bald, except for this little mohawkish thing that he had on top that he did himself because it was not quite centered, you know. And he had gold skulls for teeth. And this guy, long story short, wound up becoming my best friend for many, many years and introduced me to running because, when, you know, that just sounds like the kind of guy you would open up to, right? So I just wound up opening up to him, and his answer for every problem in the world was the same: run. And I said, okay, what do you mean by that? He said, show up tomorrow, 12 o'clock in front of the building. I did. He was there. We went to a track by the river, right by the Hudson, and we ran. And we kept doing that. And to be honest, you know, I can't say that running's a panacea. I'm not one of those guys that says that running can cure all ills and things like that. But it definitely put a floor underneath me. I didn't get any worse. But that's how it started. And that eventually is what led to my first book, which led to the journalism, because that guy never told me his last name. He was a really ninja kind of dude. One day I found out his last name, Googled him, and all of these runs that he had done, things that I had never dreamed of. Running across America, running a 1,000-mile race around Texas, 6-day races, 1,000-mile races, 1,300-mile races around a 1-mile loop in Queens. He had done all of this stuff. He didn't have a credit. Yeah, he didn't have a credit card, didn't have a phone, didn't have a cell phone, never had a bank account. The day was his life. His life was his day. And when I, approached him about it, I said, I want to write a book about you, man. It would be a great story. He said no. He wouldn't let me do it. But wow. He sent me on a journey for an old buddy of his that he said was the real deal. He said, this guy you should write about. And his name was Al Howie. And I did find him. He was in a care home. But what he had done blew my mind even more. I mean, it was, there's stacks, of hard, insanely hard, and then just stupid hard. I think we know by like Laz's races is the latter,
Mhm.
So this kind of guy was just so far beyond what I thought was possible. So that's how I eventually got started into where I am today.
And do you still talk to him?
No, I don't. He's a tricky dude. I love I love the guy. I really do. But it was always a codependency thing going on with him. I provided the food. He told me these stories. And he knew that that's the way that the system worked with him. He would always say, reverse the system. You got to reverse the system. He was a Frenchman who had actually lived in the Amazon and actually lived in Papua New Guinea. He broke out this, what he called his portfolio one night, and it was this picture of him in all of these places with indigenous people with spears and skulls. And it was really unbelievable. There's an article out there that I've written you can find. It's called My Time with El Diablo. And, but, when I moved away, I got married. I had to move out of that 80 square foot room, dude. And my wife and I were literally sleeping like sardine style. And then his source of food was cut off, so there really wasn't any point. I realized I would call him, leave him messages and things like that. Over time, he got back to me less and less, and I haven't heard from him in years.
I'm gonna have to read this article.
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting.
That's awesome. Well, so now you meet this gentleman, you start running, obviously trying to change the direction of your life, some of the things you're doing. Did it stick? Did the running stick?
Well, the running has to be here. If I don't run, I'm not fit to be around people, I think. Yeah,
I love
it's
it.
stuck.
Love it.
Yeah, it's stuck. And I would say, nothing happens fast. It just doesn't. I don't think change happens fast for most people. There are other people, I guess, that it does. They have, a traumatic event or some kind of epiphany. At least for me, change is always damn slow. And so after I met him in 2003 and I started running, it was maybe 10 years later that I went back to college and finished my degree and stopped doing the acting thing and got into writing. I just needed something to write about. And that's when he sent me on that journey. So it took 10 years, of running, always learning something. I don't know about you guys, but when I run, even if it's 3 miles, 5 miles, I come back with some little insight about my day or what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it builds up.
I can definitely solve some problems in my run, whether they're wrong or right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for catching us up on, that and explaining kind of how you got into running. Now, how did you actually meet Laz, and how did this whole book come together? Because I've ran enough of Laz's events now to realize that he doesn't share much information.
No.
And, he's going to talk, just like we talked at the Ultra Sign Up event, there was some really good discussions about whether he was like Yoda or Willy Wonka, and they both are exactly like good choices because of, it's Laz, and he's, he's kind of mysterious in a way. And when he talks, he's not always going to give you the answer you expect. And sometimes he don't even give you an answer at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In my case, the book really started in 2022 when I got a chance to do my second article for the New York Times. I had done one, but that was something that the New York Times editor had pulled out of the slush pile. So I felt really fortunate. It was about a lady that was going in her 70s, going back to Leadville to finish for like the 15th time. And I was worried that, maybe I'm just a one and done, as a writer with something big like that. But here I had a chance. They were going to send me down to Tennessee for this incredible idea of a race. It wasn't one ultramarathon. It was actually 37 ultramarathons that was going to take place in 37 countries at exactly the same time. A backyard team world championship. The only problem I had is Laz would not give me a press pass. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Would not. And I kept on him about it. And I said, this could be a really big break for me. I had interacted with him a few times because I had written some articles that were Laz adjacent, not about him, but about things that had happened in his races. And I said that, this could be a really big break for me here, if I do a second article in that many months in New York Times. And he's like, yeah, like, so what, and it kept getting closer to the date of the championship, and I was getting really nervous. And all I got back from him were these cryptic emails, like he was not saying anything. Yes or no, or maybe, who knows? Then he gave me a math problem, which I couldn't do. So I gave it to my wife, and then of all things, when I sent it to him, he said, "Did you give it to your wife?"
Really?
Yeah. And I confessed. I said, "Yeah, I did." And he said, "Do you always let other people do your homework?"
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. Then he pivoted. He said, "Come down 2 weeks before the championship and run Little Dog's Backyard Ultra. It's the B team event," he said. "You can beat down the trail for the real runners." Now, I had been riding as a lifestyle, for a living, for about 3 years at that time. So that meant, if you don't know, when you're writing as a freelance writer, your day is spent writing stories, editing stories, looking for stories, pitching stories, getting rejected, figuring out whether you're going to stay with that story, trying to find something new. It's a full-time job and more, even if you don't see a whole lot of articles out there in the world. There's a lot behind the scenes that's going on in a writer's life, which meant that I was severely out of shape. So I went down to Little Dog's Backyard Ultra because I thought he's just wanting to meet me in person. Okay, yeah, I'll sign up. And of course I had to pay my way down there, and I had to pay for the entrance into the race. No, he was ready for me to run that thing and to give it my best. And I didn't do it, man. It was another failure in a long list of failures of trying to get into Laz's world. And I thought it was the last failure. I left there pretty embarrassed about my running and questioning myself about maybe I kind of skimped with my effort in other areas of my life as a writer, even because, like I just mentioned, you're always hustling and writing things very quickly. So maybe you're not giving it your best, because you're trying to do it so damn fast. So I was in full-blown shame spiral, to be honest. And I got back, and he emailed me a link on the day of this race. I thought, oh, okay, shit. Click the link, and Zoom opens up with 37 different boxes, 37 different countries, one country in each box. He rang this cowbell, yelled happy time, 7 a.m. Central. And at the exact same time, all of these countries took off on their backyard loops. In Germany, like they were in a stadium, and it was a rainstorm was just hammering these runners. AC/DC was blaring Hell's Bells on the radio, on the speakers that they had there. In South Africa, these guys were running around a brush fire. They kept having to change the route so they could get around the brush fire, and some of them were singed. And in Ukraine, these guys were running under a street with cruise missiles. They were breaking curfew to do it. They had just had an attack earlier in the week, which at that time was the largest attack they had had in that war to date. They couldn't even use a cowbell or a horn, anything like that. They were whispering, 1, 2, 3, go. And they were just determined to do their loops. Because Laz hadn't given me a pass, what I had hoped to do was to be there with the American team in Bell Buckle, that's where they do theirs. So what I did was I focused my article just on the Ukrainian team because it was so compelling to me. And I was just convinced then that all of this had to be a book. That I had to find out what this guy's story was and find out why these people do this in a war. They were volunteering, normally for the front lines, or their husbands and wives were fighting, one lady that was trying to organize it, I remember her parents had been taken by the Russians. It was unbelievable to me that they would want to run a race. And that was the first time that it occurred to me, this is not a race. At least in the traditional sense, where you start at point A and we're going to go as fast as we can to get to point B. Well, the article came and went, and I got another email from him. I thought it was going to be more taunting. When I was at Littles, he was taunting the shit out of me, like, oh, you're really slow. Wow, you sweat a lot. Things like that. But instead, he gave me 2 press passes for the 2023 Barkley and the 2023 Biggs Backyard World Championship. And he said, failure has to hurt. He says, if you want to see how the big dogs do it, come see Man versus Mountain and see Man versus himself. The backyards are a test of not if we can do it, it's if we will do it. So that was a real creaking of the door opening there, you know. It wasn't fully open, but it was, I thought I had a good shot at it.
Man, I love the fact that Laz just didn't let you come right in. Like, that just speaks volumes to, you know, his character and who he is. And like, he really does, you know, try to keep people a little bit of a distance so that he has that little bit of mystery to him. But I really just feel like he makes you earn that time. You know, like he makes you work for it. Nothing is ever given to you.
If I were to skip ahead and tell you that it took me a year to get an agent for the book, it took me a year then after that to get a publisher for the book, I would tell you that if I had just gotten everything that I wanted right from the beginning, the book would have probably really sucked. It was because I went through all of these failures and blocks along the way that I had to go back and rewrite the proposal over again, rewrite the proposal again, figure out how to tell this story better, how to structure the book in a way where it's not your typical biography, you know. You open the first page and so-and-so was born in so-and-so year, and then A, B, C happens through Z. Somewhere along the line, you're taking a nap, you know.
Yeah.
And no publisher was interested in that book anyway. So it had to become something else. And when you go to the Barkley and then you're there at Biggs and you crew Laz for 10 days on his walk across America, you're embedded in it. So the book took on a life of its own. It became something completely different than what I had intended.
Man, that just makes it so much better. That's really, I love this story so far. We got to talk about it a little bit, but I think we're going into more detail now compared to the Trail Running Film Festival. So thank you. So when you got those 2 press passes, what was your initial thought? Like, who are you taking with you? And were you super excited? Did you think I'm in, or did you be like, oh, well, there's going to be a stipulation?
Another math problem.
Well, I couldn't take anybody with me. I have a wife and a dog, and we have one vehicle. So I'm also a non-flyer, which meant that I'm an Amtrak dude that's going to go down to Tuscaloosa because that's where I went to school. Sorry, Falls people. And rent a car and drive up to, you know, my family there. And it was going to cost me a lot of money because these papers, magazines, they don't pay you stuff anymore to go places. That doesn't happen. So in my mind, the book was going to have to happen. And I broached the subject with him. He was not against it. He just said, nobody's ever going to publish that. And I said, if you're right, then I won't write it. I'm not going to write it unless I get a publisher, because I'm not going to go the route of self-publishing, right? Or just throwing it off to a vanity publisher that's just going to publish it. And they're basically going to be a printer. Some of these, in a lot of those places you pay. I told him, I'm not going to write the book unless we get a publisher. So he felt pretty safe for a while. And eventually when I got a publisher, he was like, you know, but he kept up his end of the bargain, and there was no subject that he wouldn't, you know, let me tackle with him. There was nowhere he was not willing to go. And if I thought that I was going to be surprised by what I found when we started digging into his story, I was very much surprised and very much overwhelmed with what I did find out and what he did share, and that he was sharing it with me. And I have my theories about that.
So this was the 2023 season, correct?
Yeah.
So is the book very much based on those two events?
Yeah. So if you could imagine, I guess a good image would be a belt with, let's say, 2 belt loops and very large, thick belt loops. That would be the 2023 Barkley and the 2023 Biggs Backyard Ultra. And Laz's story is going to weave in there like the belt.
I love it.
Yeah. And that's the way the book became. That's absolutely not the way I intended to write it, but that's the way it had to be eventually.
Now, does your book focus any on, so that was the 2023 year was a very big year, especially for the backyard, because that was the year Harvey set the record and went over 400 miles. It was, it was huge. Like at the time, that was just unimaginable that we were going to hit that number. Everybody's out here watching this, and we're following along on the updates, and trying to keep up. And Harvey is probably, like that one race really gained him a lot of popularity because he was the first American. He was the first, like he won, and it was just amazing. We were all following along and cheering him on. But does your book focus on him some as well during that aspect?
Absolutely. He became the personification of what Laz would call a Danny. So for those that don't know, Laz was a volunteer basketball coach for over 25 years. He also created a traveling basketball team for elementary school kids. He organized the practices. He drove the kids around in this beat up van, took them to games, taught them fundamentals, all this kind of stuff. And one year he had a kid named Danny. Danny was not big, not strong, not fast. He was just the kind of guy that showed up when you needed him to show up. And that is what he's looking for, especially in the backyards. That's the kind of character and person that he's looking for. And Harvey Lewis is absolutely that. Harvey Lewis is someone who's had tremendous difficulty in his life. He spent 10 years in education and special education because he had been in a very rural place when he came to school. He didn't adjust to school well, and it took him forever to get out of that, but he was determined to get out. When he started running marathons, it took him 5 years to break 5 hours. It's hard to think of Harvey Lewis in that kind of context now, And seeing him at the backyard, I thought he was done in the beginning. He looked awful. First day, 2 days, he was in bad shape. And as the days, when we get to 300 miles, he dons this button-up Hawaiian shirt, gets to the starting line and sprints out of there. He was like a whole new man. It was amazing to watch. It was transformative to watch. Not just Harvey, everybody there in that backyard. We had 47 runners go 48 hours, 200 miles. I think it was 23 runners made 72 hours, 300 miles, and 8 made 400 miles in 4 days. And over half of them had gone farther than they had ever gone before.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
It just shows you, like, the name of your book is perfect for that story. Like the endurance artist, like he is creating these events for, for Laz, like he created something that was so unique that has, like you said, it's something that happens all over the world at the same time.
Yeah.
to actually just sit down and think about this stuff, like how he came up with it, and that to me is like the intriguing part, is how his mind works to come up with this stuff. And just like how he created the Barkley Marathon, around Brushy Mountain Prison, and how that came to be. Yeah. And the Vol State race that has gained so much popularity, where you run across Tennessee, and Matt and I have both done that event. And to know that he started that by just going on a walk, like that was his thing. Like, and then all of a sudden people started showing up, and he wanted to turn it into, an event. He's like, so to see the steps and how he's progressed, and like how his thinking has never really, in a way, changed from being outside of the box. Like everything he does is so much different than anybody else.
Yeah.
And your name for this book is perfect, because he really is an artist in his craft, and he sets people up with the hardest things they could possibly imagine to help them be better.
Yeah.
To push themselves and to find something in them that they didn't think was possible. And that's the whole point we ever got into race directing, but Laz puts it on a whole new level. And I truly can't wait to read this book. I have not read it yet, but after my race this weekend, I plan on just sitting down and binge reading it. So I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That even the title took forever to come up with. We had a working title between us, Laz and I, which was "Don't Go Away Easy."
Oh.
Which became a chapter title. But finding the title for this thing, everything about the book was impossibly hard. But going back to Laz's story, about being outside the box, he was always that way since he was a kid. He was in 10 different schools by the time he was in 10th grade. He was a tiny kid, so he was used to being around adults. He was also used to not fitting in. He would say the wrong things at the wrong time. He was wicked smart and clever, but devious. When he was in the Boy Scouts, you can imagine a 12-year-old picking up a handful of poison ivy after pointing it out to some newbies, and then just smushing it all over his face like this. That's one thing. And he was fine. The thing that gets me about that story is that when he was a kid, when he was younger, poison ivy did affect him. Like, he got poison ivy the way that we would all get poison ivy. It's just when he turned like 12 years old, it shifted, and something in his chemistry, hormones or whatever, he was suddenly okay. How he came to that realization, you're right, to where you're like, I'm going to try this. Maybe I'm okay now.
I would have been in the hospital. That's where I've been.
I wouldn't push that button at all. No. Well, so as you're interviewing Laz and just talking to him and getting the information for the book, were there times where he would only share so much and would make you wait till the next day to get more, or was it just kind of like always open?
It's really hard working with him. Everything is hard. I've said it, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Everything is hard. Nothing is going to be simple. First off, his cell phone service sucks. So he likes to talk when he's going on his walks. It's his favorite time to talk. And we got to where we were talking nearly every day. So there's a huge dead zone right outside of his home, and then there's a couple of dead zones on his route. So he's going to start cracking up. It's going to start, and then he's going to be gone. And you're talking, going, yeah, Laz, I'm just chilling out now. I'm hanging out, wait for you to come back. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then he starts like drifting back in. Well, that seems like a really minor nuisance, which it is. But over the course of a year and a half, all of these talks, it gets to be really, really, really annoying. And it always comes when you've got this great question you've asked him and he's finally answering it. And he goes into one of these damn voids. So you're dealing with that. But he's also got this mind that's a little bit like a wind-up toy. you can ask him a question, and initially it's going to go in the direction that you put the toy into. He's going to talk about it for a minute or two, if you're lucky. And then it's going to start veering off into all kinds of tangents. Whether it's geology, the alluvial plain, the Piedmont, rock striation patterns, Osage oranges, wild bear fatalities, I mean, you name it. 3 generations of highway guardrails. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but he explained all of this. And I started to develop this theory that, hey, man, maybe the key is to wait him out, because all the other writers I'd read never went back. If they'd written about him, I didn't see them going back for second helpings. Maybe they, because it's exhausting, right? So I thought, well, if I can wait him out, maybe when he gets, out of that little tangent he's on, and like tires himself out a little bit like a rope-a-dope technique, let him wear himself out a little bit on that subject. Then I come back to that question, and that's the way it worked. So if I asked him about his days as a hospital orderly, for example, which was something I really wanted to get at. This was in his early 20s after he had dropped out of college, and between the time between college and when he started putting on these races, I wanted to get at that. I'd ask him, he would start to answer, either the reception would go out, or he would go off on tangents of other stuff about hospitals and this and that and the other, and then talking about Memphis, which is where he was living at that time. But then I would come back to it. And that one took the longest of all of the subjects that I wanted to get to. And it wasn't until we were at the backyard together. So I was at the fire pit, and he's on this hourly routine. He's not going to miss ringing that cowbell. And he always comes back to that fire pit, that we would start to get some real conversation going on that was lasting days, Mm-hmm. It was great. We were in and out, but we would pick right up where we were, where we'd been the previous hour. And one night he went there about his Memphis days as an orderly, so which I felt was really the crux of a lot of what his races were about. Because as an orderly there, he saw these people that would do anything to get out of there. If you've been in a nursing home or spent any time on an orthopedic floor like he was working on, you know what I'm talking about. They've got some injury that happened to them. It wasn't their fault. And they just want to do everything they can. Take all the medication, do all the therapy. And then there are other people that are there looking for an excuse, trying to check off a disability box. He was shocked by that. And he was also shocked that both kinds died. And that was not fair. None of it was fair. And he had to take them to the morgue. That was part of his responsibility. So he wound up taking 11 bodies to the morgue in 10 days when he was working on the coronary floor. But these individuals, that's what we got to talking about. I remember one in particular that had been blown up while working on a 18-wheeler with a big wheel on it, had blown up in the rim, and it had shattered his legs. And it was an older black man. And the man was determined to do everything he could to get out of there. And Laz didn't think he would ever walk again. The doctors told him he would never walk again, but the guy did. And Laz would have lunch with him most days. Laz would go up there and take his lunch there and sit and visit with this guy. And the sad part about it is that once he got better, he had nowhere to go. And that same willpower that had got him out of that hell just let go of the body. His pulse went down a little day by day. And a few weeks later, he passed. The power of the will over our physical bodies, both in a positive way, a negative way, or however way you want to look at it, was something I think that greatly affected him. Yeah.
Man, that definitely hits home with some of his events.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you think about there is no finish and what that means, you can say it's just a clever thing to tape over the starting arch, because you don't know how long it's going to go. Nobody knows how long this race is going to go. I came to think it's more of a life motto. If you are living it as if there's no finish line, you're going to give it everything that you've got. Or at least every minute has a life of its own. Sometimes when we think about a finish line, we start to plan and we start to calculate and adjust what we do in accordance with this finish line. But as I would find out, Laz's own life and his own health circumstances were really drastic. And he didn't know when his finish line was coming, starting at the age of 12, when they found a tumor growing towards his brain. He had a 1% chance. His high school was spent with surgeries once, twice a year, trimming this thing back. So the idea of no finish line, I think, really comes from that kind of experience, because tomorrow could be the finish, right? When you're in that situation. So how do you adjust to that? How does a 12-year-old deal with that? Just not think about it. I hit him so many times, just hit him with messages and phone calls saying, man, come on, you were scared, admit it. You were frightened out of your mind. Any kid would be, right? It's like, no, not when you're 12 years old. You deal with it in a completely different way. You forget about the finish line. You can't deal with it. So you're going to live every day as if it's a bonus day.
I bet it took a year just to get that information. That's something I had never heard before.
Nope.
So that's
I've never heard that.
really interesting, and that it all just kind of ties together to, kind of show a little bit about Laz and how he has became this very outside the box thinker, and obviously his life has had a huge impact on that. So it's really cool to see how this all ties together. Really well done, Jared. Like I love that. That's very interesting. Cool stuff, man. What
Appreciate it.
I do have a question. I know him and his dog were very close. And he's, obviously, the race was named after. But
yeah.
Does he go into much detail about how all that came to be?
Sure, absolutely. Big lived that same experience. I think he saw himself in Big, because he found Big shot underneath a fallen tree. He was limping around. At that time, Laz was limping around. He had a blocked femoral artery. There was a chance he was going to lose his leg if he didn't move. He had to keep moving. That's why he does a lot of walking every day. He doesn't take days off, because they put a stent in there and the stent failed within a year. So he was looking at this dog that had been abandoned, that nobody wanted, that had been shot with a hollow point, which shattered into his chest. If it hadn't been a hollow point, it would have killed him, because it would have gone directly into his heart. Instead, it just shattered and spread all over his chest. So Big came to represent so much about his theories, and by the time 2011 comes around, and he had found Big the year before, I think all of these ideas and themes that he had been implementing in his races, going way, way back, were just gestating and simplifying into this idea of the backyard. It's so unbelievably simple, but it's incredibly unorthodox, where every runner is tied for the lead until you're out. Just a few years ago, I could line up against Harvey Lewis. Me, average runner, urban runner guy, could line up against Courtney DeWalter at one of these things, and some sick part of your mind says, I've got a shot, because it's only 4 miles. All I got to do is not quit, right? It's enticing and it's brilliant.
Yeah,
and it's no surprise, that there's 80 countries around the world, with backyards.
Right. It gives everybody a fair chance.
Yep.
And there's not many races where speed doesn't matter.
Nope.
Talent doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What matters is your will. and can you continue to push yourself to a point that you feel like you can't go, and find a will and a way to continue to go. And up until the Backyard Ultras, we had never had that.
No.
Ever. I remember the very first time I saw Big's Backyard Ultra on Ultra Sign Up, I was like, is this like someone's yard? Like, is this in the backyard? I was trying to figure it out because I honestly didn't know. And then, you start learning more year after year, and you learn that, well, Big's actually the dog. So the race was named after the dog, and that's where Littles came from. That's his, so, but in the beginning, I had no idea what Big's even stood for. I'm like, Big's Backyard Ultras. Is his name Big? Like, and like, it's just so interesting that that's the creativity, though, of Laz, is that it doesn't really have to have any meaning to you. It's the meaning to him.
Yep.
And, like, he's developed that to where people just now they understand. It's like, oh, that's Laz.
Yeah.
And like, that's really cool that he continues to be on the forefront, even now, of doing stuff so different than everybody else.
That's what artists do.
Mm-hmm.
Artists are taught not to think about creating a product for people. If you think that way when you're painting something or writing something, you're going to fail. You have to create something with what you want to read, what you want to see. And the genius of what he does and what other, artists, it does feel strange sometimes calling him an artist, but I think that he very much qualifies.
Yeah.
And I think that it's remarkable when someone's interest like that and what they want to do and what they're creating jives with so many other people, and seems to be something, I forget what the quote is, but there's a great quote out there, and I think it came from a fashion person that said, your job is not to find what people want. Your job is to find out what people want that they don't yet know that they want. So yeah, how he has created this Backyard Ultra phenomenon, which whoever thought that's what we needed in the sport. But when things are blowing up with UTMB and coverage and all these races, and things are becoming monetized, commercialized, and commodified, Backyards is so refreshingly different. And I'm not saying that Laz is above any of that. One thing that surprised me a lot about him is his willingness to change and adapt to situations. And I think that there may be a sponsorship coming down the road with Biggs. So I think that he's very much a pragmatic person when it comes to that. But the race itself, I know that he cares about his core values enough to where he would never sign it over unless he knew that it was going to be run and done the way that he wanted it to be. The fact that he's given away the Barkley to Carl Laniak, it's unbelievable. He is able to keep changing and adapting his situation. I thought that was a joke when I arrived in 2023 and Carl was there in training. And then when I came back in 2025 and Carl is doing everything, I couldn't believe it. How can you let go of your magnum opus like that? But he can do it.
Now, is Carl in your book any?
He is a little bit, but because I'm only mainly focused on 2023, and then the past with Laz and going through that and all of my journeys with him, there's not a whole lot about Carl in there, but there is a chapter, I believe it's chapter 12, where we were talking about the Barkley and him giving it away. So that's a big turning point because that's when I found out, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, things change. He wants to focus on the backyard solely.
I love that, though. That's, everything he's created has kind of grown into these nostalgic events.
Yeah,
no
definitely.
matter what they are.
Yeah.
Like, you got Ball State, you got HOTS, you got the Backyard Ultra, you got the Barkley. I mean, you've got uh, oh geez,
Strolling Jim,
yeah, I think you
Strolling.
Strolling Jim.
Race
Strolling
for
Jim was
Ages.
yeah,
Yeah.
Strolling Jim was one that at the time was very unique too. The distance and everything else was
Yeah.
like very unique, and I mean, people loved it, and they still love it. Like
Yeah.
that's what's just really cool is like everything is so much different, and you got to give him props for that. And Carl has been with him for a long time, so
Absolutely.
I'm sure that Carl has picked up and learned so much valuable information from Laz, and I'm sure that those, like you said, those core values of that event will never change.
Well, even like with Vol State, how Carl, I believe, I'm not positive that he's took over Vol State. It's what it seems like. And he's doing all the writing and stuff on social media, kind of like Laz was, giving updates and, cryptic messages, all through that. So, which is cool to see.
Yeah. It's planned that way. I don't know how it's going to work because Laz is such a personality and such a draw for people. I feel that they're not coming to the Barkley or these events sometimes for the courses or the races, but to be challenged by him. I just came back from the Barkley Fall Classic, and I can tell you it was unlike any Barkley Fall Classic I think they've ever had. Only 20 people finished. 5%. It was pretty wicked. I'm not an expert on the Barkley Fall Classic, but most of the people there was some crying and gnashing of teeth.
Well, I had one of our friends, Misty. She takes photographs there, and I had messaged her and I said, I heard it was a rough year, and she said, and I guess she was at Ratjaw and waiting on them to come back up the second time, and I guess hardly anybody made it back the second time. So she said it was very slim for pictures at that point.
This is the lady that's missing a big toe, right?
Misty? No, I don't
think she's missing no toe.
No, it's Misty Dawn Photography. I think there is a couple of photographers though. I wonder if that's Jenny, maybe.
This was not a photographer. It was a lady I met there named Missy, I believe was her name.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah. She pulled her shoe off, and there was no toe there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, Misty has all of her toes. She's a super talented photographer, and she's taken pictures at the Barkley Fall Classic for years.
Yep.
Like kind of just fell into it like at some point where she was there, and someone I don't know if it was Laz or someone just asked her to take pictures, and it might have been one of Laz's other race directors. It might have been Steve Durbin that told him or just asked her to take pictures, and then all of a sudden now she's every year she's a photographer. So it's kind of like that cryptic thing again. She was just there, and it just kind of happened. But yeah, she's there's a couple of them that are really good. But it was just interesting to hear because to take a race that's already hard, and to completely change it every year to keep people guessing in the same area, that's talent.
That is.
I mean, that's artistry is what that is. I mean, because you say it right. You say he's an artist, but he truly is, because think about how many years this event has happened and how every year it is never the same.
Yep.
Never. Yeah. I mean,
that
is an artist.
I saw these guys coming down the very bottom of Ratjaw. If Ratjaw is a leg, I'm talking about just looking at the toenail of it, which was like 100-foot climb of overgrown kudzu, which you didn't know how deep it was until you heard some like rustling up there. Sounds a little bit like maybe a deer. And you see a head bobbing along, disappearing, falling, reappearing, falling, and the guy comes out. He's got a little stick that he'd been using to brace himself, and he hurls it back at Ratjaw. And that turned out to be the winner. It was pretty surreal. But like you said, the effect that it has on people, because you're creating something different every time. For all of those people that have done it numerous times, they are surprised how different it is when they come. I remember one guy came up to him, and I think this speaks a bit to being an artist. When you can get a reaction like this, a guy came up to him at the end. He was just covered with dust and dirt, and his legs are all cut up and his arms are cut up. And he goes, "You're a sick, sick man. I appreciate you."
Oh wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love it. So I have to ask you this, and I just want to know, like, you've spent all this time with Laz. How has that had an impact on your life?
Well, all of this is about ultra running and extreme endurance running, right? And if we do that, then I think we do a really disservice to what is going on there. If you can't take something as a metaphor and pull it out of its context and adapt it to your life and what you do, then I don't think it's as meaningful. When you see someone like Jasmine Paris finish, and then you see small European woman trending all over Twitter, X, and these people responding, "I've never run in my life. I've never done a marathon, never done a 5K. I'm standing in a supermart and I'm crying and I don't know why." They are extracting from these tests, these endurance puzzles, something that they can apply in their life. It means something to them to overcome something. And I think that's where the artistry comes out, even though it's not intended. He would definitely never consider himself an artist. If he could title the book, he'd probably just call it The Idiot, which is what he went by for a long time. He had a lot of other nicknames too. Myself, I took a lot away, as far as what kind of writer I wanted to be. I had talked to you earlier about, what it's like to hustle and be a freelancer and to always send things out before they're really done, and you've been able to probe it all. In this case, I took a lot of time off from journalism. I was only doing some articles if it was around Laz, was connected to his walk. I did an article for The Guardian called "I Don't Smoke on the Uphills." So I was always combining it with a Barkley or his walk. I put a stick-it note on my window that said, "How good?" ? And it was really less of a question, more of a dare to myself of when was I going to give up on this material, or was I going to keep going into it and try to make this paragraph even better, make this section even better? How can I improve this and improve that? And it's funny how the universe sometimes starts working with you. On my computer, this damn Hemingway quote kept coming up. I don't know if you guys get these, but I get these quotes that come up on my social media feeds from famous people. Usually for me, it's writers. And this one from Hemingway, and he's staring at you, with his really, piercing eyes. And it was like, for once in your life, go all the damn way with it. And it just kept reappearing on my computer. And I was determined that I was going to do that with this book. I wasn't going to leave anything out on the field, which is what happens in the races. That's what you see. And when you see people giving that much effort, it affects you. You take that into yourself. And when you see Laz do that on his walk, he doesn't just talk the talk. He does walk the walk, despite a whole rap sheet of health injuries and ailments. He's now on his third walk across the country at 71 years old. It's remarkable. How can you then, sell yourself short with something that you say that you care about?
Yeah, it's kind of cool to think about the fact that he still does that in his 70s, like the walk across America, and that he still works towards that, and that he continues to still do the damn thing, like try his best to be his best. And I think that speaks volumes to the type of person he is. If I'm going to ask you this, you can answer it if you want. You don't have to give away too much, but overall, what is for you in the book? What was your biggest takeaway? Like, just looking at the book in whole, like, what was your biggest takeaway and lesson from this book?
I saw a lot of people do things that I could tell that they did not think they could do. At the Barkley, at Biggs, when it's going on and on and on, there was a Japanese national champion of the backyards. There were 5 Japanese runners there at Biggs that year. He was the national champion. And just to give you a little background, a little context about like what this meant to me, my wife is Japanese. I had a business with Japanese people for 10 years here in the city. So I was working as a kind of a translator for them during this race. I've never been hugged by a Japanese man. My father-in-law has never hugged me. It's just not part of their culture. So let me just leave that out there, and we'll come back to that in a second. So this Japanese national champion, he had his tent separate from the others. And he ran with this pride. He looked like an actor. He had these really strong facial features. And he would come in near the front of the pack every loop, day after day after day. And you could tell that it meant a lot to him to be carrying that weight. Well, when we got to Tuesday afternoon, things got really hot again. It hadn't rained in weeks. There was dust, kind of floating in the air the way that it gets, in a race. And people were dropping. They were collapsing out there. They were having to be extracted. People were having to go out there and get them. And they were coming in various states of disaster. Not able to remember family members and friends. One Philippine runner, I remember his eyes were bulging wide open and not blinking. Scared everybody half to death. And then I was called to the timing tent. And they said, Jared, we need your help. I said, what the hell is this? My job is to watch the fire, and to watch the race. So Laz gave me a job at the beginning of Biggs, was to guard the fire. Nobody touches the fire but him. That's it. And so, okay, I'll do that. And so they called me to the timing tent, and they had a few cameras around the course, and so you could look at the screen. And there was the Japanese national champion. And he was walking in circles out in the woods, not on the trail. And it appeared as if he was talking to some trees. And runners would come by. You could see them pass him, and you couldn't hear the sound. And he was in a delirium, whether he recognized them or not. He was in bad shape. So they asked me to go out there and get him because I could help translate. And there was a whole issue about the cameras. So if you were there in 2023, there was a French film crew there. Guys with cameras following people everywhere, capturing everything. So they had the cameras on poles, and they had people with individual cameras. Laz called me over, and he said, listen, you get out there to that Japanese runner, if you can, you ask him if he wants cameras or not. Because if he doesn't want cameras, meaning that he's in such a bad state, where he doesn't want to be seen that way, Laz said, we won't have cameras. If you just call me to get up there. So I went running with his handler, the Japanese runner, and I. It was a girl named Chi-chan. That was her name. And she was a mess. She was sobbing uncontrollably. The Japanese thing, she just thought it was her fault, that she had failed him somehow. That's why he's out there like this. She hadn't supplied him right. She had made a mistake somewhere. She and I go running off in our various conditions. I'm sleep deprived. She's crying. Harvey Lewis comes around the turn, and he's got blood dripping from his nose and onto his singlet. And it was like he didn't even see me. He was in this zone. That's the best way I could describe it. And we went past him, and I saw the Japanese man up ahead lying on the ground on his back. We went running up to him. We both knelt down beside him. She continued sobbing and apologizing to him. His eyes were swimming, with the leaves and up in the sky. And I tried to talk to him in Japanese, and what he was doing was looking at her and putting his arm around the back of her neck and telling her it's going to be okay. It's okay. It's okay. He was comforting her in that situation. My job was to find out if he, was okay with the cameras. So I started trying to get him to talk to me to see if he's cognizant here of what's going on. I asked him, "Where are you?" And he then his eyes came back over to me and he said, "Tennessee." And I thought, okay, he's going to live, which is good. And I asked him if he wanted cameras. And he said he did. Absolutely. And in that moment, a lot of this craziness made sense to me. Like, he was proud of himself. He didn't quit. You can imagine, he had come from Japan, where they call it the last samurai standing. That's what they call a backyard. The last samurai standing.
I love that.
He had come over as the national champion. They had to get, sponsors. They had to take time off work.
Mm-hmm.
He has a family. He's got kids. And he didn't quit. His body quit. He couldn't go anymore. So the whole pressure of will you quit or not was gone. And we took him back into camp. The next day, he shows up to see how everybody else is doing. He sees me. He comes up to me, and he hugs me. It's the only time in my life I've been hugged by a Japanese man. And both of us were in tears, and we didn't know why. I think because we shared something in that moment out there in the woods. After all of those days of seeing each other, you would come in, nod, I would nod or wave, say something. You build this relationship that I think a lot of runners know about. They know that. I think a lot of runners can relate to that story because they've experienced it with other runners and things like that. And for me as a writer, it was unusual, to say the least.
You know what's intriguing to me about that story? Is that your job was to watch the fire. But I think Laz knew you probably needed that was going to help you to see something. Because why else would he have sent you to go check? I understand, you could probably communicate some, but at the same time, he chose you for a reason. Have you thought about that, though? He chose you for a reason to go do that.
I can't say that I actually thought about that in particular. It's interesting that you bring that up. I did become aware at some point that the coach in him was taking over. Yeah, that he didn't want me to give up on certain things, and he wanted me to stick things out because we were sharing a lot. And it's possible that he would do something like. I would not put something like that past him.
Yeah, it to me it ties all the way back to talking about in the very beginning, will, and continuing to fight and to go, no matter you don't think you have any chance at all to go any further, but you've got to have will to try, and you got to have the will to try all the way back to him being an orderly.
Yeah,
I think he wanted you to see that.
Well, he got his wish.
It's really cool to me. I mean, again, he's an artist. There's no telling but I'm sure that was very well thought out. Just knowing Laz.
He allows things to happen. And Aurelian Sanchez in the 2023 Barkley was on the 5th loop, and he got to the next to last book. It wasn't there. There was no book. And he had to ask himself, was he in the wrong place? Was this the wrong cairn? But he knew this was the right cairn. He knew. And he destroyed it. He took it apart looking for that book. Now, what had happened was a hiker had come by and thought the race was over, had taken the book and brought it in, and it had reached Laz at his pillar. And one of the runners there said, hey, I'll run it back up there to that book, to that cairn. I'm sorry, I'll run the book back up to that cairn. Laz said, no. Things happen. We'll see how he's going to deal with it. So in Aurelian's mind, he's finishing the Barkley thinking maybe he hasn't finished. Maybe all of this was for nothing. And this was a guy, unlike a lot of the ultra runners, this was a guy that got started because of the Barkley. He had seen the Barkley documentaries, and he started ultra running and doing FKTs with the intention of making it to the Barkley. That was his sole goal, and he had come from France. And he came into the finish line, and Laz, was there just with a smile. And Aurelian said, hey, there was no book. The next to last book, it wasn't there. And Laz goes, oh, you mean this book?
That's a true test. Wow. Can you imagine how disheartening that would be?
No, it's like you get there and you're like, there's no book. I mean, there's a choice there. Continue or you're done.
99% of the people in this world, I have no doubt, would have said, yeah, run that book back up there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're spot on. The way he behaves as a race director is completely outside the box from what I've seen from anybody else.
Yeah. 9%. I mean, I have no doubt when I say that number. I know if someone would ask me, I would have been like, yeah, get it up there quickly. Hurry. But for Laz to turn around and be like, oh, this is a test of his will. This is a test of can he do it? Will he do it? Or will he give up because he can't find that book?
Yeah. There was a man that he talked about in the hospital that was just mowing his yard. And some drunken asshole came flying off the highway and nailed him and just shredded his legs. And now this guy has got to relearn how to walk. That's not fair. That's not fair. But if you tell yourself that, and it's not fair, you're not going to come out of there the same person or the person that you want to be. So going back to what we were saying about being able to extract things from these races that's beyond who's winning something. That's not what I hear when I'm at the Barkley is somebody winning the Barkley. Or on the other side of that token, I don't hear people say, they lost the Barkley. There are guys like Leonard Martin that's been going out there for 27 years that's never gotten a fun run. That Laz allows in to a legacy loophole, Frozen Ed, people like that, to keep trying to better what they want to do in their life. I was shocked to find out how much this race meant to people that live in that ecosystem of the Barkley. The volunteers like Keith and Dobies and all these people, they drive hundreds of miles to be there every year. And they wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, it's absolutely 100% the most unique race that you can ever possibly imagine. And he created it. That. And he just continues to create it. And Laz is one of those people that he gives you the opportunity to accept a challenge. Just to accept a challenge, period. Like, are you that person that will accept a challenge knowing that there's probably more likelihood that you're going to fail than you will succeed?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the one that's going to give you that challenge to find out, are you are you capable of at least attempting it? And what are you going to learn about yourself? And the fact that like he made you run littles, like, well, I didn't make you, but ask you, like, pretty much to the point, like that was your opportunity, but it was a cost. It was a cost to you. You had to accept that challenge, and you had to have the will to do it. And that's the thing. It's like Laz is one of those people that he has created something that helps people find the best versions of them, and you don't really understand that until you've done it.
Yeah.
Right.
Just incredible.
Yeah. I beat myself up so much about that run. But looking back on it now, even if I had won the damn thing, that wouldn't have mattered to him. It wasn't about that. It was about driving down there, paying for it on my own dime, showing up at the time and being there and being willing to fail and see what the race itself was really about, to be with the other runners, to get an idea, a taste, and a feel, and then to come away without getting what I wanted. The press has to be there to cover the American team. That's what it was about. So all of my, thrashing of my soul for not going farther, and it's really embarrassing. Meant nothing. It meant nothing in the grand scheme of things.
No, he was testing your endurance.
Yeah.
Just in a different way.
Yeah.
He really was. He wanted to make sure you were truly in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Jared, I will turn it over here in a minute for questions, but I want to ask you in a different way. This is a question we usually end on before we start listener questions, but I'm going to twist it just a little bit because we're talking about obviously your book and Laz, but why was it so important to you to tell the story? Like, why did you try so hard and endure Laz for, you're talking months and years to write this book and to get a publisher and to go through all of that. But why was that so important for you to try to share the story?
Anytime that you start a book, you're basically looking at a 5-year deal. And then the book is going to live with you forever after that. So it has to be something that means a lot to you on a lot of different levels. I grew up in North Alabama, as I mentioned, and spent a lot of time with my dad, his family was really close to the Tennessee line. As it turned out, about an hour away from where Laz grew up. I always wanted to get out. I felt like I had to get out to find the world that I wanted. And I had this feeling after being around Laz for a very short while, actually. It came to me pretty early on that he had been in a similar situation as me, not quite fitting in. I was in a mid-sized city in Alabama. My family was from these very rural counties of Limestone and Lawrence County, and my city was basically half populated with people from other places all over the world, mainly from up north, from Michigan, places like that. They came there for the jobs or working in Huntsville and things like that. So I never fit in. I'd go hang out with my grandparents and my mother's family, and I was too city for the country people. And then when I was in school in Decatur, I was too country for them, and I never had my place. And I thought that my place was somewhere out there, and I've got to go find it. Laz had that same experience, bouncing around all these schools, never quite fitting in. But he reacted to that situation in a completely different way. Instead of going out and trying to find this new reality, let's say, he created. He stayed there with his family and where he grew up. Bell Buckle is not far from Tullahoma or War Trace where he lived, or Shelbyville. All these towns are right near each other. And he just created his own world. And that's why I go back to the Willy Wonka thing. He's somebody that, in every sense, go back and watch the Gene Wilder film. He has created his own universe. He lives in it thoroughly. He doesn't do too well or have any interest outside of it, really. And he tests people like Wonka, the parents and the kids alike, with their character, with their decision making, with their willpower. And you're not quite sure if this guy is on your side or not for a lot of it. Because let's face it, man, being tested is not fun. It's not fun. After you finish the Barkley Fall Classic, which is not one of his most difficult challenges, let's just say that. I'm not saying it's easy. It's brutal. It's not the big one. It's not the big Barkley. And people don't have to endure days of this stuff like they do at Biggs. Or you could argue a lot of other events. That's really neither here nor there. But, it's not pleasant when you're going through it. And Wonka, in testing the kids and the parents and all that, and even up until the very end, when Charlie has the golden ticket, Wonka goes off on it. If you watch it, you're like, what? He's yelling at the kid. And then he just turns on a dime and says, Charlie, you've won. And he takes him up in that glass elevator, which shatters through the roof, just kind of the bounds of our normal existence, Elevators should not be flying out of a building and into the air, right? And you realize then that all he ever really wanted was for you, the right person, to take over what he had created. That's what Wonka wanted. And that's what I think Laz has tried to do for all of the runners that enter his races and the other people that enter his life in various ways, is to get them to have some kind of transcendent experience. And that probably comes off a little cheesy, but I think he does aim for some kind of experience like that.
Anybody that knows Laz knows that that's not a cheesy explanation.
No.
That is, to me, that is spot on. Like, I think you nailed it with Willy Wonka. I have to agree. Harvey called him Yoda, and we talked about that for a little bit at the ultrasonic event. And he does talk a lot like Yoda.
Yeah.
Like, he talks in riddles,
Yeah.
And I think they're both great, but I do think his creations are so much like Willy Wonka. Like, he is truly, like you said, he is trying to find out your character and who you are and test your will. And I mean, your explanation is dead on for anybody that knows Laz. But it's interesting because I had never thought about it that way until you said it. And it makes so much sense now when you describe it, because you can just see it. And I think it's so spot on. And I think that speaks volumes to you on how well you pulled information out of Laz and were able to interpret and understand it and put it into this book, because I would have never ever even thought about comparing him to Willy Wonka. And even when you first said it at the ultrasonic event, it kind of shocked me until you explained it. And then I was like, damn, that's really good. Like, that's really good. Like, you nailed it. And I think he is the modern day Willy Wonka, whether you want to call him that or not, he truly is, because he is that. Like, he lives that. That's just who he is. And if you know him, he's going to test you.
Yeah, he is.
He plays no favorites.
Yeah.
No.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, Matt, let's turn it over to you, sir, for listener questions. Jared,
questions.
Thank you so much for being on here and doing this. And that explanation was truly good at the very end. Thank you so much. But we're going to turn over to Matt now. We got a couple listener questions for you.
We got a couple questions. These two first ones are about the Barkley Fall Classic, because two of our team members were there and they ran and they got to meet you. The first one is, what is the craziest thing that you witnessed this year or in the past if you went to the Barkley Fall Classic?
This is my first time at the Barkley Fall Classic. So the craziest thing that I witnessed at the Barkley Fall Classic. It's easy to say that lady without the toe, but she wasn't running. Yikes. That's really hard to say. My experience with the race is really different. So when I was at the Barkley, my job was last. I was really focused on him, and I didn't leave camp because I was focused on him the entire time. Both times that I've been there, that was the case. So this was the first time that I actually got on the course a little bit. And for me, looking up at Rat Jaw at the very bottom of it with a jungle of kudzu and seeing it, how steep it really was. When you see that, I mean, as a Southern person that's, as a kid played in the woods, that's not a place, I'm not going up that. That's not where you don't go there. If you do, you're going to get in trouble with your parents, That was to me, the craziest thing I saw was Rat Jaw. And it's not even, in my mind, I know it's not even the most difficult climb for the Barkers, but seeing that, yeah, that was crazy.
I've not got to witness that yet. Maybe never.
Yeah, well, you gotta do it at least once.
Nah, maybe. The next one is, why didn't you give this guy the heads up about how hard the Barkley Fall Classic was going to be?
because I did not know, brother.
And you signed his book as well.
No, I did hear, but he says every year it's going to be easy, right? Oh, it's going to be easy this year. I did know that it was going to be 15,000 feet of elevation gain. That I did know. So
crazy.
But he wouldn't even give me the course. I was like everybody else. I didn't know what the course was going to be until registration.
Wow.
Did you say that he signed this person's book?
Yeah, he signed his book.
Well, there you go, Jared. You met this person.
Yep. You said go far.
Yeah, well, I hope they did.
He finished the marathon, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The next question is, out of all the stories and all the stuff you learned about Laz, is there something that you took out of it that you didn't put in the book?
One real regret is that I couldn't write a Bible, which is what Laz had taken to calling it the Bible, because I wanted to know about everything, and you couldn't put everything in there.
Mm-hmm.
The experience I had with him on his walk across America was enough to write a small book about, even though it was 10 days. You get into this ritual with him. He's up at 5 o'clock, cracks open a Dr. Pepper, smokes a cigarette. Then he opens a 16-ounce can of liquid speed called a Bang.
Mm-hmm.
That's the brand. He downs that sucker, and he's on the road. And within the first 30 minutes, you're going to have to pull the car over and angle it to kind of shelter him so he can piss. Because after taking all this stuff out, seeing him, there's a point in the book, I won't give it away too much. I'll probably already have it in other places, but there's a point in the book where I talk about the walk a little bit in the epilogue, to where when Laz was going to quit, he himself was going to quit. So all that's in the book. And then he had this moment of pain when he got a pinched nerve in his back, and that seemed to be what he needed. And 30 minutes later on the road, that's in the book. So what's not there is the fact that he spent the rest of that day climbing this mountain into West Virginia that would not quit. Even in a car, I kept going, damn, this mountain does not stop. It was on a really severe grade. We had taken a side road because he figures this out the night before. This might be better. Less traffic. It was less traffic, all right, and for a reason. It was steep, really steep, and he didn't stop. he would take breaks. He'd bend over, and go, God, and curse the mountain. And, he was at war with it. And I wish that I could have included more of that, more of being in a tiny little motel in Wardensville, West Virginia, with him. His habit of always having the TV on while he writes 2 hours a night to let his readers know how that day went, how maniacal he is about writing those posts. And sometimes his computer would screw up or he would lose the internet and it would go away and he would yell, to the gods, scream at the walls of the computer. I've got a friend that can imitate it. He helped imitate him. It helped crew us a couple of those days. I wish that I had time to put more of that in there. But this is a narrative journey, and the narrative arc and the way everything was going, it just didn't allow it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that he was in a way at war with that mountain, trying to get up it, and the back pain. That's cool. I love that. Any other questions?
That's all I got.
All right, I have one last question, and then we'll end the podcast. Why this picture for the cover?
Oh.
Do we need to charge the phone first?
Touch me not so closely. They were throwing around a lot of options for the pictures, and it just wasn't right. It just wasn't right. We were sifting through them, we're trying to get the right picture, and none of them were right. None of them were right. And I remembered an article I'd read called Good Luck Morons by a lady named Sarah Estes. She had been a criminologist. Well, she was studying criminology and was moonlighting as a writer and written this fabulous article. And she had told me about the photographer that had worked with her. And so I knew that she had taken the photos for that article. And I thought and remembered a picture of him in that cell where for once in his life, it seemed, he actually was looking at the camera. And I thought it encapsulated everything about his story, about being bound, let's say, by the conventions of society, yet being determined to break free of those. And I think you see that in a hint of the bars there. So there was this smirk on his face at the same time, which really hinted at breaking those conventions. And I thought that image really just summed him up. And he was also recognizable as the lads that we know, not the exact same red and black checked flannel, but it was a checked flannel shirt. And it was one of those things you look at it and just, that's it.
I've wondered that since I've saw the cover of this book. That's why I wanted to ask, because I thought it was a very unique photo, and I figured either you chose it or Laz chose it for a certain reason. So thank you. What did Laz think about that photo as the cover?
I have no idea.
I love it. I love it. Jared, man, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on here with us. It's been so fun, and I cannot thoroughly wait to read this book. It is going to be so much fun to dive into this. I've got to talk with you about it twice now, so I'm pretty fortunate in that I've got to interview you twice now on this book, and now I'm going to read it. So I got my 100-mile race Friday, and then I'm going to recover reading this book. So that's my plan.
Yeah, I was excited about reading it to begin with, but now there's so many little nuggets that I've learned today. Now I'm more excited.
Now, one thing, when is the audiobook coming out? Because I'm sure people are going to want to know that.
October 7th.
October 7th. Oh, wow, that's close. Well, Jared, thank you so much. Truly, it's been so much fun. Thank you for taking the time to do this, and we'll share a link for the book on the podcast when we do it. If you have a certain link you want me to share to it, it's I can put whatever, but I'll share a link to the book just so people know how to find it. And then October 7th, guys, be on the lookout for the audiobook as well. Jared, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor.
It has been.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.